It's crazy to think that Ratchet & Clank first stole our hearts almost 15 years ago, and during that time we've gone on so many different adventures with them. Hi everyone, I'm Justin with the Leaderboard, and today we're looking at one of the longest running PlayStation franchises of all time. Grab your Omni-Wrench and tell Clank we're going on another adventure because it's time for 107 facts about Ratchet & Clank. Let's get started. Ratchet & Clank was created by Insomniac Games, the same studio that previously brought you Spyro the Dragon and later on, the Resistance series. As of this video, there have been 17 releases in the series so far on a multitude of consoles, which we'll cover shortly. The very first Ratchet & Clank game was released on November 4th, 2002 on the PlayStation 2. It seems like just yesterday. The first game was a smash hit and went on to sell 3.3 million copies. Clearly, it was a huge success. After the first game, the relationship between Insomniac and Sony stayed strong, so the rest of the series went on to exclusively be on the PlayStation family of consoles, not including Ratchet & Clank before the Nexus. Ratchet wasn't originally going to be the furry creature that we know and love. He was actually supposed to be a reptilian alien that traveled through space. Speaking of other characters, what about Clank? His real name is actually XJ0461, but why does Ratchet call him Clank? Well, while on their journey to planet Novalis, Ratchet's ship rocked and made Clank hit the side of the ship, causing a clank sound, and so the nickname formed and stuck. Clank was originally a robot that was supposed to fight against Ratchet in the original game. He was allied with Chairman Drek, but then when he found out his evil plans, he helped Ratchet win the fight. If you're familiar with the PlayStation 2, you are probably familiar with Jak and Daxter, which was made by Naughty Dog. In the early days of developing the first Ratchet & Clank, Naughty Dog offered Insomniac Games the opportunity to use the same engine as Jak and Daxter. Insomniac happily took the engine and tweaked it to make it their own, meaning fans should definitely thank Naughty Dog for their help. Because Ratchet & Clank really took off for Insomniac, a sequel was obviously in the cards. Ratchet & Clank 2 Going Commando was released only a year later on November 11th, 2003 to rave reviews. In Going Commando, if you stay on the main menu long enough, you'll see Ratchet play a bunch of different games, including Ratchet & Clank 2 Going Commando, Jak and Daxter the Precursor Legacy, Jak 2, and Sly Cooper and the Thievius Raccoonus. How meta is that? There were a lot of changes since the first game. The first is Ratchet's voice actor. In the initial game, Ratchet was voiced by Mikey Kelly, but from the second game onward, Ratchet is voiced by James Arnold Taylor. In Going Commando, you can upgrade your weapons in the most fun way possible, by using them, which makes players want to change up their fighting style instead of just sticking with and favoring one specific weapon. Genius. While a weapon reaches its highest power at around level 10 in all other games, you can keep leveling the weapons up in Ratchet Deadlocked. Go all the way up to level 99 and your gun will shoot rainbow ammo. Otherwise, there really isn't much of a difference in its power levels, it's just prettier. Third person isn't your cup of tea? Well, for the first time in the series, Going Commando allows players to experience the adventure in first person. All you have to do to unlock this feature is beat the game once. The name of the game, Going Commando, other than just being a snarky little joke, is actually a reference to a skill point that you can acquire in the first game. Who doesn't love a good callback? The snarky names continued with the series' third release, Ratchet & Clank Up Your Arsenal, which once again debuted in North America 1 year after the previous game on November 2nd, 2004. That said, the European version of the game didn't include Up Your Arsenal in the title and simply went by Ratchet & Clank 3. In Up Your Arsenal, if you hold down L1, L2, R1, R2 at the same time and then press the start button at the main menu, you can play a demo of Sly 2. Oh, Insomniac, you stealthy one, you. Speaking of cheat codes, in Up Your Arsenal at the main menu, you can press circle, square, up, down, left, and it will replace your Omni-Wrench with a lightsaber. For the first time in the series, Ratchet & Clank Up Your Arsenal included a multiplayer mode that could either be played offline with split screen or online. You could even talk to other players through the chat headset. Yeah, we're talking about the PlayStation 2 in 2004. Up Your Arsenal is filled with firsts. During the campaign, you can play as Captain Quark in a series of 2D side-scrolling missions. This wasn't the last time the series would be playable in 2D. Ratchet & Clank Going Mobile was released in North America on November 11th, 2005. This mobile game would be the first Ratchet & Clank that Insomniac did not develop. Instead, it was made by the company Handheld Games. I wonder what kind of games they develop. This little spin-off was very well received and actually won Best Action Game at the 3rd Annual Mobile Entertainment Awards. Way to go, guys. Going Mobile was supposed to be the start of a new miniseries specifically on mobile phones. While it did well enough to warrant a sequel titled Ratchet & Clank Clone Home, the game was never finished or released. If you played Going Mobile, you received an exclusive code to unlock a new armor set titled Renegade Armor in the series' next release, Ratchet Deadlocked. Ratchet Deadlocked was released on October 25th, 2005 in North America on the PlayStation 2. It's the first game in the series to break the Game a Year/November release date tradition, even if it's just by a few days. Ratchet Deadlocked Deadlocked is the only game in the series where Clank isn't in the title. This was due to the fact that Clank is no longer on Ratchet's back and isn't a major player in the game. Here in North America, we know the game as Ratchet Deadlocked, but in PAL regions, it goes by the name Ratchet Gladiator, which if you played the game makes perfect sense. Minor spoiler, it takes place in a space coliseum. Similar to Ratchet & Clank Up Your Arsenal, Ratchet Deadlocked includes a multiplayer suite that can be played both online and off. In the multiplayer mode of Deadlocked, you can actually play as Jack from the series Jak and Daxter. Insomniac and Naughty Dog really do love each other, don't they? Speaking of Easter eggs in this game, try morphing a flying enemy. Chances are at some point, you'll get a pig with wings. Deadlocked is a departure from the normal Ratchet & Clank formula and heavily focuses on arena combat instead of that awesome action platforming goodness that we're used to. Even though Ratchet & Clank was a huge success for Insomniac Games, the next game in the series returned to its action platforming roots. Ratchet & Clank Future Tools of Destruction was released on October 23, 2007. Tools of Destruction was the start of a new chapter for the series since it is the very first game in the series to be released on the PlayStation 3 with highly improved graphics. Not only was this the series debut on PlayStation 3, but the start of a new era of Ratchet & Clank. Tools of Destruction begins the future saga of the series, in which the story takes a more dramatic turn. Ratchet & Clank Future Tools of Destruction uses the same game engine as Resistance Fall of Man, another game released and developed by Insomniac Games. In Future Tools of Destruction, there is a skill point that harkens to a popular handheld video game series. The skill point is titled Gotta Catch 'Em All. So can you guess what it is? It's Pokemon. Speaking of handheld games, Ratchet & Clank made their PSP debut with Ratchet & Clank Size Matters, released on February 13, 2007. The innuendos continue. Ratchet & Clank Size Matters wasn't actually developed by Insomniac Games. This time the biz was handled by High Impact Games, which is a small studio that is actually made up of fragmented members from Insomniac. Size Matters was the first game where you could customize your armor. If you collected all pieces of an armor set, you could get to employ special effects like setting your wrench on fire and freezing your enemies. Size Matters on PSP featured an online mode with Capture the Flag, Iron Lombax modes, and Deathmatch. The online mode stayed exclusive to the PSP version of the game, even though a port of Size Matters was being developed for the PlayStation 2. Ratchet & Clank Size Matters was released on a stationary console on March 11, 2008 on the PlayStation 2. That same year, Clank jumped back to the PSP in his solo game debut, Secret Agent Clank. This game was released on the PSP on June 17, 2008. This was the first game in the series to feature Clank as the main playable character without Ratchet by his side. In terms of gameplay, Secret Agent Clank is a departure from what you would come to expect out of a typical game in the series. This time, the game focuses more on stealth than shooty platforming action. Just like Ratchet & Clank Size Matters, Secret Agent Clank was developed by High Impact Games. After the success of the PSP release of Secret Agent Clank, a PlayStation 2 port of the game was developed by Sanzaru Games. You might know them if you're a fan of Sly Cooper, as they ported the Sly Collection and created the amazing Thieves in Time. This was the last time we would see Ratchet & Clank appear on PlayStation 2, as the duo jumped back to the PlayStation 3 with Ratchet & Clank Future Quest for Booty. Ratchet & Clank Future Quest for Booty brought the development of the series back into the original company's hands, Insomniac Games. It was released on August 21, 2008. The game was originally released as a PlayStation Network exclusive download priced at $14.99. It would later be released in other regions as a physical copy. Insomniac Games has stated that Quest for Booty is a quote side adventure that takes place right after the events in Tools of Destruction, and before the events of the next major release, Ratchet & Clank Future A Crack in Time. A Crack in Time was released exclusively on PlayStation 3 on October 27, 2009 and received amazing reviews. Although we know the game as A Crack in Time, that wasn't originally its name. The first title of the game was Ratchet & Clank Future Clock Blockers, but Sony didn't allow it to happen. I guess you could say they got clock blocked. A Crack in Time features two very different styles of gameplay, that of Ratchet's, which we know and love from prior games in the series, but also Clank's new time-bending abilities. There's really so many layers to these characters. A Crack in Time also featured a collector's edition only available for purchase in the PAL regions. This edition included the game, 3D lenticular cover art, a concept art book, and a code that unlocks the Discovery package for access to the Insomniac Moon through the PSN store. In Japan, Ratchet looked quite different from how the rest of the world saw him in A Crack in Time. His eyebrows were black and much thicker. Supposedly, this was done to make the Japanese audience relate to the character more. You may also meet a plumber in this title that asks Clank to jump in a pipe and find a clog. And Clank asks if the plumber will join him. He remarks that plumbers don't jump into pipes. Well, we all know what that's a reference to. The collector's edition includes a lot of cool stuff, but the game itself doesn't include a multiplayer mode like the past games in the series. However, for fans of Ratchet & Clank multiplayer, you'd get an entire game based around the dynamic of teamwork with Ratchet & Clank All for One. All for One was released released on PlayStation 3 on October 18th, 2011 with an ESRB rating of E10+. It's a cooperative experience that can be simultaneously played with 4 players on a single PlayStation 3. Although the name All for One reflects the gameplay within the game, there were some other names in the mix before release, most notably Ratchet & Clank 4Play, Ratchet & Clank Multiple Organisms, and Ratchet & Clank Bros Before Foes. Gee, I wonder why none of those got chosen. For the first time in the Ratchet & Clank series, All for One allowed players to experience the adventure in stereoscopic 3D. As we all know, the future is now. All for One features 4 main playable characters with Ratchet, Clank, Captain Quark, and for the first time in the history of the series, Dr. Nefarious. Even though this was a serious departure from the normal Ratchet & Clank formula, the game sold extremely well. How well? 1.14 million copies well. All for One wasn't the last time the series departed from its action platforming roots. Ratchet & Clank Full Frontal Assault released on November 27, 2012 for PlayStation 3. Full Frontal Assault changed up the series quite a bit and focused on tower defense combat unlike previous games. If you bought the game on PlayStation 3, you received an opportunity to acquire the game for PlayStation Vita as well, but the port wasn't released until a whopping 6 months later. Again in North America, the title of the game was a bit more risque, going by Ratchet & Clank Full Frontal Assault, but in Europe and Australia, the game was known as Ratchet & Clank Q-Force. In the game, you play as the Q-Force, with a choice of single player or a variety of multiplayer modes. Both could be played online or offline with your buddies. But the series would once again leave multiplayer behind in the next installment. Ratchet & Clank Into the Nexus would be released on November 6th, 2013. If you bought a new copy of the game on release, you received a code to download a past game in the series, Ratchet & Clank Future Quest for Booty. 2 games for the price of 1? Not a bad deal. Anyone have a time machine? The game was exclusively released on PlayStation 3, even though a rumored PlayStation Vita version of the game was in the works. Not to mention, if you looked at the trophy list, it does say that there are trophies for PlayStation 3 and PlayStation Vita. Wonder what happened behind the scenes. During early development meetings, Into the Nexus was going to be called Ratchet & Clank Into the Nether Regions. Insomniac just does love a good dirty joke, don't they? Ratchet & Clank Into the Nexus shares a similar name to a cancelled game that was supposed to be released earlier on in the series, titled Ratchet & Clank Nexus. Around the time of Into the Nexus, a mobile phone game was released to celebrate the launch of the PlayStation 3 release. That game would be Ratchet & Clank Before the Nexus, which was released on December 18th, 2013. Before the Nexus was developed by Darkside Game Studios and published by Sony Computer Entertainment. In this game, you play as Ratchet as he grinds on rails and earns raritanium that can be used in Into the Nexus on PlayStation 3. That is, if you log into your PlayStation Network account and tie the two together. You can play the game and earn bolts just by playing, but if you want to cut to the chase, you can buy crates of bolts ranging anywhere from $1.99 to $9.99. Once again, the series strays away from its roots in this installment, taking on the form of an endless runner and removing all elements of the series' beloved action platforming. Studios took a break from Ratchet & Clank until Insomniac returned to the series on April 12, 2016 with a game simply titled Ratchet & Clank. This game is a retelling of the original Ratchet & Clank story that was released back in 2002. Oh, how time flies. In this PlayStation 4 remake, pay attention to the advertisements at Big Al's RoboShack. A lot of the items listed are references to Insomniac's past works. If you're a fan, you'll probably get a kick out of the names on some of these items. Any idea what Spyro could be referencing? In this version of Ratchet & Clank, you can also collect holo cards. Collecting them all gives you super awesome rewards, such as higher value bolts or unlocking Omega weapons for challenge mode. The game already looks great on PlayStation 4, but it can look even better if you're playing the game on a PlayStation 4 Pro. They just keep adding more and more detail. This new Ratchet & Clank game was paired with a widely released feature-length film, once again starting a new era for the franchise. The Ratchet & Clank movie was released on April 29th, 2016. It was produced by Rainmaker Entertainment, which has since come together with Frederator Studios under the WoW Unlimited Media umbrella. All the voice actors reprised their roles as our favorite butt-kicking characters for the feature-length film, giving it that authentic feel. Plus, the movie has quite a few huge references hidden within it, notably Daxter and Sly Cooper, both from their respective series. Keep an eye out for them. Aside from Daxter and Sly, Dan Johnson makes a cameo appearance as well, just like in the Ratchet & Clank series. Wait, who's Dan Johnson? He's a level designer who worked on the very first game, and who more importantly became a famous Easter egg that appears in almost every game, excluding Deadlocked and Going Mobile. Did you know that you can actually decipher the alien language in the Ratchet & Clank film? According to director Kevin Munro, the language is original and can be read, if you know how to translate it. TJ Fixman is the lead writer on the Ratchet & Clank movie, which is pretty great considering he also wrote a bunch of the video games in the series. And outside of the many video games and the movie, TJ Fixman also wrote the Ratchet & Clank comic series as well. These comic issues feature names that were originally planned for the mainline games, like Multiple Organisms and Bros Before Foes. They really just can't throw these away. In the first game, there's a person who caught the attention of many players. The girl who advertises the hoverboard races will, react if you do some flip-flops next to her. Do it long enough and you'll see those things grow to the size of a about 2 soccer balls. Yeah, hey, I didn't do it, I'm just the messenger. While playing Ratchet & Clank 3, did you ever feel like the boss Courtney Gears bared a very close similarity to Britney Spears? Well, that was intentional. If you pay close attention during the fight, you might even catch Courtney Gears saying an occasional, "Oops, I did it again." Yeah. In Going Commando, it's possible to play a game called Sheep Invaders. How? Zap the game pyramid in Clank's apartment, or if you're short on cash, smash it for a total of 1,024 bolts. Throughout the entire game series, there are 338 playable weapons. That's a lot of fighting power. A common theme throughout many of the games is the inclusion of the Rhino. This is a monster of a weapon that can be obtained through collectibles and other means. And did you know, RYNO, Rhino, actually stands for Rip Ya New One? Yep. Certain games in the Ratchet & Clank series feature a room called the Insomniac Museum. In this room, you can check out all kinds of super awesome content that was cut from the game. In the Game Size Matters, there's a treehouse that shows concept art and cut assets similar to the Insomniac Museum in the other games. It reveals things like characters, challenges, and weapons that never made it into the game. Ratchet & Clank have made their way outside of their own games as well. Both characters appeared in the 2012 release PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale. Is fighting really not your thing? Well, Ratchet appeared in his rival's racing game, Jak X Combat Racing, on PlayStation 2. If you've ever had the urge to play the first 3 Ratchet & Clank games released on PlayStation 2, you'll be happy to learn that they were remastered in HD and brought over to PlayStation 3 in the form of the Ratchet & Clank Collection. This collection was released on PlayStation 3 and PlayStation Vita on June 28, 2012. The collection was also ported by Idle Minds. Speaking of games being brought over into the HD era, are you a fan of Ratchet Deadlocked? Well, if so, you can experience an HD version of Ratchet Deadlocked on PlayStation 3 as well. Idle Minds once again came through with the HD upgrade, making the game look for the most part better, besides a few glitches of course. The games have always had collectibles, but a mainstay in the series is the gold bolt, which can be found scattered around the environments within the levels. In a majority of the Ratchet & Clank games, if you obtain all the gold bolts, you can unlock multiple different outfits for Ratchet. The whole franchise now has over 197 different weapons, and that's just base weapons. That doesn't even include upgrades and modifications. Thanks for watching 107 Facts on Ratchet & Clank. Who is your favorite character from the series, and what's your favorite game? Comment down below and let us know. Don't forget to subscribe to the Leaderboard to stay current on all future uploads, and hit that little bell icon to become part of that awesome notification squad. If you want more from me on my own personal channel, Stuff with Scoutfly, check out the description down below. Thanks again for watching the Leaderboard, where we help you game smarter.